welcome to the tree subcommittee. And I just want to acknowledge also that there are some folks that regularly do attend this meeting that are no longer attending. They have decided to recuse themselves from this process because they intend to apply for the RFP. So the district is happy to facilitate this meeting, as kind of the main purpose is to continue reviewing the RFP. And just to provide some context for those of you who were not able to join us. In our last meeting, we did review and receive feedback on the first half of the urban greening request for proposal. And so the purpose of this meeting, as you can see in our agenda, is we'll spend kind of a little bit of time at the beginning just reviewing some of the changes that were made based on the feedback we heard at the last meeting. And then really the remainder of the meeting will be to kind of hear any additional questions, comments, and feedback. Are there any questions about that before we get started? I know that there's I thought maybe we could go ahead and skip over introductions. I think some of us are familiar with each other, and I think maybe we'll have a lot to discuss in this meeting.
I do have a quick question. Of course, Clifton has generally been the participant on behalf of Puentes, and we're changing some things around, and I was just getting up to speed. However, if this is problematic for me to be here, if we are looking to possibly apply for the RFP, then I'll need to say goodbye as well.
I think generally what we've heard is kind of anyone that it does intend to apply for this RFP. I think at this point, since we're really getting into the details of deciding who's eligible for this project and the scoring criteria, some folks have decided to step back, but I'll kind of, Aaron, do you have any other thoughts about that?
No, I just agree. I think since her or her organization will apply, I think that at this time it would probably be best if she excuses herself at this point in time.
Okay, wonderful. Well, it was nice to see all of you. All right, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I just don't want to be in that situation where they had an unfair advantage. I think Matt understood that a couple meetings ago, I think, as well. Nuts and bolts of things that they can't drive the nuts and bolts of it, right? What they're going to apply for. So.
Sounds good. Thanks for that, Aaron. And with that, I think I'll go ahead and pass it over to Kat to kind of discuss again. First half, we're going to discuss some changes that were made to the RFP based on our feedback from the last meeting. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, but I'm going to pass it over to Kat to discuss these changes.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for providing your feedback from our last meeting regarding this RFP. I think we were able to make many changes to our document with your latest feedback, which I'm going to go over right now. So the first item is on page 2, is the first paragraph. There were comments regarding the need to add a deciding factor on how applicants can demonstrate the ability to efficiently and effectively implement urban greening projects, such as letter of reference and other information that the applicant must submit to demonstrate this. So for that comment, we were able to make an update on our scoring criteria table, which I will be going over in more details in a bit. We also made updates to several sections for the urban greening language, which would decrease the exposures to emission. That was incorporated into the first paragraph on page 2 under the background section in this second paragraph, and then in the qualitative benefit section on page 3. At the bottom of page 3, we had also made updates to the schedule section to provide a little bit more information on some of the timeframes to give everybody a better idea of when some of those events will be taking place. The applicant workshop would happen 14 days after we release the RFP. The purpose of this workshop is to go over the RFP, answer any questions that any applicants might have. The proposal submission deadline would be expected to close after 45 days, and we're looking at approximately 90 days for the proposal review and final selection announcement. On page 5, we had also incorporated additional comments. Under section 2, we included additional language to provide some flexibilities for those applicants that would be able to provide letters of commitment or agreement. Under the project eligibility section, we had also added language to highlight proposed locations that may take into account nearby air monitors for consideration. On page 6, under section 3A, per our discussion at the last CSC meeting, we did remove the initial study. And under the scoring criteria section, as mentioned earlier, we added a new section for the supporting documents for the applicants to demonstrate the ability to efficiently and effectively implement urban greening projects. And those documents would include summary of past projects and experiences, letters of references, and resumes. So these are some of the key changes that were made based on comments that were made from our last meeting. And I understand that we did receive additional comments throughout today, which we have will take another look at. And I believe a lot of those comments were pretty minor too. So we'll be incorporating some of those comments into this draft moving forward.
Thanks.
With that, I'll pass it back to you.
Awesome. I just did also want to mention why this is highlighted. In our last CSC meeting, we did hear some feedback about the subcommittee wanting to kind of participate in the process of the scoring criteria. And this is kind of this, just a note of that. And so this is highlighted because this is kind of the process that we do want the subcommittee to have feedback. And so we'll plan to have, once the RFP closes, plan to have a meeting with the CSC and subcommittee in order to like present and then also rank the submitted proposals. So those are the recent updates. Does anyone have any questions about them?
So I do. Sorry, Doug. I would want to know that the RPF is for the organization to receive the contract yet. Has that been placed a bid already? How many people have been bid out for that tree subcommittee?
Yeah, this is Stephanie Douglas. That's a great question. And so this, right now we're working in the subcommittee. This document is just a draft because we wanted to get this subcommittee's feedback to get guidelines about to kind of give to the contractor in order to pick what, these are guidelines and we're going to put the bid out once the subcommittee and the CSC are happy with kind of this RFP. And then that's when the solicitation will go out in order to find someone, an entity to implement this project. So it's not released yet. These are just kind of, we're working together with the subcommittee in order to kind of get a good set of guidelines in order to find this contractor.
So we have got a base guideline already. So we start from 1, 2, 3 requirement. What are we looking for as far as urban trees and things that will help manage air pollution low down?
Douglas, are you just asking about kind of like who we're looking for in terms of a contractor for this?
Yeah, the guideline of how are we going to be able to requirement that efficient for the contract to go and after for this particular service work project from us is the guideline. So how are we making a base the guideline to the end? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, this is Stephanie. I can share my screen and just kind of walk through some of the things that we're looking for when we're, for this contractor. Can you see the RFP?
Can you make it bigger? I can't see, Douglas is asking.
Does that look good?
Just a hair more, if possible, a little bit larger.
Ooh.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. And so some of the things it's a little cut off, but I'll just kind of verbalize them. In terms of projects that we're looking for, what would be eligible, some of the things that we're looking for is like if it's possible, we'll ask the applicant to consider some of the local community air monitors that we have around Stockton. Also, we're looking for, for the trees that we're looking to plant, there are some requirements for selecting the species, such as like non-invasive ones, non-poisonous. I also just wanted to go down to the scoring criteria, and that will give you a good idea of how once all of these contractors are, once the applications come in, this criteria is what we're going to be looking at to score, all of these applicants that we get in order to see which is the best fit for this project. And some of the considerations we'll take into account are the cost effectiveness of the project, the exposure benefit. So again, we're thinking about, this is a big consideration that the subcommittee and CSC has brought forward of these really benefiting the sensitive populations, and then also if they are in proximity to buildings in order to reduce energy costs. We're also thinking about things like co-benefits, like criteria air pollution, pollutant emission reductions. And then again, like I mentioned, things like species selection, we want to make sure the types of things that are getting planted are appropriate for the area. And then also just in terms of like more administrative things, we want to make sure that whoever is selected for this is ready for the project. They're able to show us that they, there also is weight towards people that can show us that they've effectively implemented urban greening projects before. Does that answer your question, Douglas?
Yes, I see a lot more clearer because I think it goes by stages. When it's gonna get done, and just have a stage of what's next. I think that's a good idea. I like it.
Cool. Thanks, Douglas, for the feedback. Are there any other thoughts about some of the more recent updates that were made to the RFP?
This is Margot. Can I just butt in? And I know that Ned put in the request for information about the contractor looking at where the air monitors are. But I saw that you responded to him, Stephanie, so thank you. And you pointed out where that was listed. But I wonder if when the projects come in, if we notice that there is a need for more air monitors, is that something that our camp could be looking at, or we could be looking at? Just food for thought, just to connect, the different groups. Well, I mean, we're doing the air monitoring. We picked locations, and they may or may not be conducive to the tree planting. I don't know. What do you think? Just keep it in the back of our minds for now, and we'll see.
Yeah. Thanks, Margot. This is Stephanie. I just want to share with the group, Ned Leva shared some comments about asking about prioritizing or questions about if there was language regarding planting trees near some of our air monitors. So that's what the comment that Margot was referring to. And Kat did share with there's a new update that kind of is asking the applicants to take into account those community air monitors. And I guess to your point, I think something that we actually very recently heard that's very exciting is they're also, Matt Holmes has shared this project that Little Manila Rising is working with UC Merced on, in which we'll plan, it sounds like really the goal of that project is to put up a lot of air monitors in Stockton. And so we've kind of been keeping abreast with that project to see where potentially if some of these monitors can, I think their project is pretty early on, but to see if some of these air monitors can align with, additional air monitors can align with some of the planting we're doing. I think also on something that is on our minds is we do really want this RFP to be inclusive and not limiting to a point where we just want folks to consider, like, we could anticipate that some of these projects might be located in places that aren't near air monitors. And we don't necessarily, I guess a consideration that we're thinking of is we don't want to exclude any projects that could be potentially really good projects in the community that aren't located near air monitors. So that's something that a reason why we didn't necessarily make it kind of this hard, solid requirement. So I think open to hearing feedback on that, Margot, if you have any other thoughts, but that's also a consideration. I definitely hear what you're saying and what Ned is saying about locating your air monitors when possible. And I think some things we're thinking about are also just making sure that this RFP is not limiting in any way to any of the applicants.
Yeah, and I think there's enough people on the committee that are cognizant of this issue, and we'll just stay on top of it as we move forward.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. And I don't think this is, like I've mentioned, this isn't the only time in the last spot that this subcommittee will have feedback on things like that. Again, some things we're looking at is once the RFP, if the subcommittee is supportive of it, we'll look to kind of bring it to the full CSC. And once the RFP, the solicitation is open and, applicants apply, we'll come back to the subcommittee and CSC on scoring and kind of looking at the types of applications that we get through. So this, again, isn't the only time. This isn't our last stop of where the subcommittee will have a chance for feedback. Yeah, and I guess, so just to kind of close off, that was just feedback. We're going over some of the recent changes from the RFP. And I'd definitely like to open up at this time to see if anyone had any new additional feedback on the remainder of the RFP. Like I said, in our last meeting, we did go through the first half. So if there's any comments, questions, feedback, suggestions on the second half of the RFP, we're really open to hearing that right now. Go ahead, Douglas.
I noticed there's a lot of fire that we have in camping in like Stockton area. Have you guys always established the location of where the veggie tree or plant might be on that to raise the level of increase the level of the weather from heat? I know that when we put direct heat from the pavement, it can get warmer during the summer, and then it gets really hot during the season and during all year. So when you put the trees there to cover it up, it's less heat in the city. So have you already planned it out where we're going to be able to harvest those trees or whatever? Irrigation or whatever they needed to do in order to do that, like in Oak Park, there was a lot of trees dead over there by where I live, and some are in the Victory Park, some are in I don't know what, I just don't know, I just kind of curious what the location will be. Is it going to be a non-park project, or is it going to be a park project, or is it going to be over by the airport where it has nothing about warehouse and no tree? So it's a curiosity right there too that needs to be answered.
Yeah, great question, Douglas. This is Stephanie. And so I hear you asking about if we know about any potential locations. And I heard what you're saying about, really one of the goals of this project is, like you're saying, when you plant trees, you're reducing this, what they call the urban heat island effect, right? You're providing shade. And so just to kind of clarify, right now in this RFP, there's no exact locations of any plantings right now. Again, these are kind of guidelines that we're providing, and it'll be up to the applicants that apply to this to let us know about these potential locations that will be planted in the community. And Dave or Kat, do you have anything?
Are you saying that the applicant, you're talking about the contractor that's doing the RP, or you're talking about the organization that wants to put whatever they want the RPF in this location? Which one are you referring to? Is this a two-way street? Am I understanding?
So Douglas, this is Stephanie. It's one and the same. The applicant, we hope that this solicitation will go out and we'll get hopefully quite a few good applicants. And then, this applicant that is selected will be the contractor that will implement this program. So we're talking about the same entity. Someone's going to apply, they're going to implement this program. And Dave, I don't know, again, if you had anything to add. I do believe in the actual application, there's a specific question that does ask about potentially like providing locations, correct?
Yes, we do. We're looking to see, obviously the goal of this RFP is to find an expert in tree planting. Obviously, if they have the locations already or are building upon that, we definitely want to see that so we can share with the CSC. And so that the CSC understands where potential these projects would be being implemented out. Thank you.
Awesome. Are there any other piece of feedback, questions? I wonder also if there's none at this time. I'm wondering the district, like we are happy to walk through some of the other parts to kind of highlight maybe some parts of the RFP, if that's interesting to the group for the remainder of the RFP. Not seeing any objections, so I'll go ahead and highlight some. Walk through. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just have a question. I was wondering, after the implementation is like after like the applications are accepted and such and like they're implemented, who is in charge of like, the upkeep of those areas?
So that'll be on the responsibility of this entity that's getting the contract.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's a section about the actual contract period, and it is a 10-year period. And then the actual project implementation is 3 years, within 3 years.
Yes, why don't you go through the rest of the RFP?
Awesome.
Because it sounds like you had some thoughts on it, on how to proceed.
Yeah, there are some parts that I think we're really excited about. So we can just highlight some of those sections, and then yeah, if there's no more feedback, we can kind of discuss potentially next steps. So go ahead and share my screen. So again, I think actually from the last meeting, this is where we stopped. And again, this is a section that is highlighting the project evaluation and the scoring criteria. So this is the criteria we'll look to kind of score all the applicants that come through. And again, this section is just highlighting that the subcommittee and CSC's participation in that ranking and ranking and scoring process. Just kind of moving down here in terms of just additionally, we've talked about potentially like applicants applicants actually looking to some of our community air monitors. We also did in the application, we've heard it many times from the subcommittee, of just really placing a high priority on these measures that will protect the health of sensitive receptors. So again, that's something with our children in schools, medical facilities. So there is information regarding that for the applicant. And of course, like all of our projects, we're looking for this to be implemented within our AB 617 boundary. There is some information regarding calculating emissions reduction. So this is for the applicant to walk through kind of how to go through that process. And then I guess I'll just kind of skip, sorry if this is making folks a little dizzy, I'll kind of skip over to some of the more process-wise things of actually the submittal. And so just kind of walking through this process, what we hope will happen next is, if the subcommittee is looking at this RFP and thinking they're happy with it, we'll go ahead and move forward with kind of per our charter. We do want to make sure that if the subcommittee is approving of it, that we bring it back to the broader CSC to get, inform them, but also to get buy-in from the entire CSC. And if that's the case, then after we release this RFP, we'll have a workshop, which is going to take place, I think, about 2 weeks into the process to help answer questions for any folks. We did hear from, and just to give you all context, we've actually released RFPs for some of our other communities, our AB 617 communities. So Shafter's released their urban greening RFP. Fresno has released their urban greening and vegetative barriers RFP. So we're kind of rolling here with these processes, but something that we're looking to for them and we'll look to for Stockton too is to do this applicant workshop where we essentially answer questions, anything regarding the application, or we've heard from other communities potentially there might be questions regarding using the iTree calculator in order to calculate emission reductions. So that's all something that we're open to answering during this applicant workshop. And again, after this RFP closes, we'll look to work with the subcommittee on ranking and scoring all the applications that come through. And I'll go ahead, David, Kat, are there any other sections that you think that?
I believe Douglas have a question. Douglas?
Yeah, I see. Thanks, Kat. Let me stop sharing.
Yes, one last question. When you were giving an information regarding all the things that is listed required, now, I know the city and the county, they have their own planning commission. Are they going to be, they have their own master plan, they have their general plan. So how are we going to, are there going to be any intrusive or anything that we might want to say, okay, we want to have this particular area done, and then yeah, the city will have their idea plan, general plan set up for different urban gardening, urban tree. How will that be affected? Are we going to be able to go over by them, or are they going to be able to work with them, let us know, and let the city council and the supervisor know that we're going to, the community want to have it in a certain area of the South Stockton, whatever, what the subcommittee needs. So that's what I'm just asking. That's all. Thank you.
This is Stephanie. I think I'll take a stab at answering part of it, and then I'll pass it over to our grants team if they have anything to add. And so I think I heard you're asking about potentially if there's other tree projects going on in Stockton, right? Okay. Awesome. And so I'll just kind of say, in part of the application under the funding available, we definitely want to make sure that, and so the applicants will have to let us know if they are receiving any funding from any other sources, any other projects. And then also we want to make sure there's definitely language in here to make sure that, you know, if there are projects that are funding through things that are existing in the community, we'll want to leverage those funds to kind of expand any projects, but we of course don't want to be, you know, duplicating any efforts. And so there is language in there about that if an applicant is already kind of receiving funding for projects that are related to this. And David, Kat, if you have anything to add to that.
Definitely, if they wanted to leverage with other projects, they're more than welcome to. Match funding is not required, but it does provide that flexibility.
Great question. And I guess the kind of the final thing of the, I won't share my screen for it, but I'll just kind of say, in some of our other communities, we did have maybe some questions about some smaller community groups and maybe just some fears of the difficulty of the application. And if that's maybe something that's piquing your interest or maybe that you're thinking about, we do just want to say that they're not actually attached yet, but we will when the RFP, whenever the RFP goes live, is in addition to this actual document, the appendices kind of have very clear applications and guidelines. And so there, in addition to kind of what's asked here, there is a very clear template that folks will walk through when they're applying. And then also there's, again, that language to help walk applicants through the process of calculating emissions reductions. And so we hope that kind of eases anybody's concerns about maybe this process being a little difficult. We hope that we've provided enough information to make the application process really simple, in addition to kind of doing that applicant workshop too, about 2 weeks into the process.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. This is David. I just wanted to kind of just expand on that. Yeah, the RFP will kind of outline all the eligibility, the project criteria, and there is a section called the implementation plan that we have applicants write up. It's kind of a narrative and it gives them an opportunity to express their program. And then, as Stephanie had mentioned, the exhibit C of the RFP will have an application. You can fill it out. There is no limit on page size. We allow, you know, if people want to expand on assumption, it'll have the budget information, mapping, all that kind of stuff. It's really kind of clear cut, and we've got a lot of good feedback from our other locations that are other communities that are doing this. So it's I think we're really close. So we're looking forward to hearing any other feedback that the subcommittee might have.
Well, this is Margot. I don't have any feedback. I think it's looking good. I'm eager to see it rolled out, and I'm curious to hear how Shafter and Fresno, they're the ones that already rolled them out, how they're going.
I guess I'll talk a little bit. We released Shafter on the 13th, and we released Fresno yesterday. So you can absolutely. So we're just getting started. Next week we'll be having on the 28th our workshop with the Shafter community. The Shafter community only has $50,000 assigned for the project, so it's going to look quite different than the Stockton one, and the Fresno one had some particulars that they wanted, but we after the discussions with them, they were actually very positive on the RFP, and the eligibility criteria and everything is very similar to yours, and then the application packet that's the Exhibit C. They were once they saw it and everything, they felt it was really easy to follow, so there was a lot of great feedback on that. But they're excited. Like I said, both the Shafter and the Fresno RFPs are open for 45 days. And that was because they wanted to get moving and looking to start planting in the fall. For this program, I think we're pretty close, and it sounds like without the additional feedback, if there isn't any, we can provide the final draft to the group and with the application and everything. And obviously I'll let Stephanie and Jessica, do their work with within the charter that the Stockton group has. But ideally, if everything works out, maybe next month we can launch the draft, launch the RFP for urban greening, have around a 45-day window for projects to come in. And then once we receive it, depending on how many projects we have up to 90 days, I think, or approximately up to 90 days to review. Hope maybe it doesn't take that long, depending on the number of applications, and that the subcommittee can see, and then obviously bring it back to the CSC for approval. But and then once the awards are done, we can then start working on providing contracts to the groups, and hopefully the contracting period doesn't take too long, and we can either hopefully maybe looking towards fall, late fall, early winter, to getting everything executed and moving forward for I guess launch of implementation early next year. I won't put since we have a couple different RFPs out, I won't put a fine timeline on it, but we can definitely get moving in terms of launching the RFP as soon as everybody in the committees are happy and ready to move forward. So.
Thanks, David. And that's a great reminder. Just to give this tree subcommittee context, we do have two trees measures. So one is the urban greening, and then we also have vegetative barriers. So just for some context, we are looking at urban greening. And if folks are kind of happy, we can move forward with that. And then we'd move on to kind of this very similar process with a very similar RFP, but for our vegetative barriers measure. And I just I'm seeing some comments in the chat that I just kind of want to say aloud. We have Nate joining us. Thanks so much. It looks like he is in a different workshop and multitasking here, but we thank Nate so much for joining. And also want to thank Sue's addition here regarding who takes care of kind of maintenance. And so any particular area will be subject to existing utilities, permits, etc. That should be a responsibility of the contractor, which we agree with. Thank you, Sue. So
So what we looked at today was urban greening.
Mm-hmm.
And have we looked at already the vegetative barriers? I can't remember now. Is there already a draft for vegetative barriers as well?
And well, we do have a draft, but it hasn't been released yet. We have seen the vegetative barriers project plan, I believe. And so kind of what we were thinking of next steps is potentially kind of in the next maybe week or two, releasing a draft of vegetative barriers in preparation for our July meeting. And we can kind of begin that kind of same feedback process with that RFP. Generally, we will kind of say both the documents are very similar. As you look through vegetative barriers, you'll realize there are a lot of similarities with urban greening, if it feels familiar to you, because both projects are pretty parallel to each other with some, slight modifications. Awesome. If I'm not necessarily seeing any more questions or comments, and so I wondered if next we can maybe just discuss some potential next steps with this group. And so really, again, based on kind of our charter and our commitment to bringing all of what we work on in subcommittees back to the full CSC to kind of get buy-in from the broader group, we did want to propose the potential for sending kind of a very brief poll to the CSC to get approval for the release of the RFP with the subcommittee's recommendation. And part of the reason for a poll is that way we don't have to wait for our August meeting. As many of you might remember, we're not having a July meeting. And so our next meeting will be August 3rd. And I think there's really a lot of good momentum with this group. And if there is potential to get these projects going, to maybe have someone prepared for the fall for planting, that's something we definitely want to keep an eye on. And so just wanted to gauge with this group if that feels like something we want to do. And again, would be sending a brief poll to the full CSC with this subcommittee's recommendation to get a final decision from the group of releasing the urban greening RFP to solicit any applicants. Any feedback from the group if that's good? We want to move forward with that.
Who was the resident co-chair on this team? Was it Matt?
So we had Matt and then also Clifton.
So both of them are recusing themselves at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Is Nate is involved also with it or not?
Can you say that one more time?
Nate.
So,
Is Nate involved anymore? Is he holding a position as chair for this subcommittee, or what is his involvement thus far?
Thank you. And thank you. So Nate is not a co-lead for this subcommittee. We had Matt Holmes and Clifton Maxwell, but Nate does, as you see here, come to our subcommittee and provide feedback.
So he's from the San Joaquin County of Government. So he go and give feedback to the main board and discuss on the subcommittee advisement, or if they want to be chaired and there's nobody able, it's not chairperson, what to be the next step? I would request for a chairperson to lead this subcommittee if everybody's recruiting themselves or what?
So I think Nate's just at a SJCOG meeting just for their own interest. Right now, we're not necessarily kind of asking for any new co-leads. I think at this point, since it is the case that we're bringing a district document, the RFP, we're happy to kind of facilitate this conversation. If anyone in the groups is interested, we can definitely look towards that. But overall, yeah, I think next steps we are looking for. I'm wondering if regarding this, if there is support for this in this subcommittee for moving the RFP forward. I'm wondering if maybe I could just get a general thumbs up, thumbs down of whether or not we want to send a poll out to the full CSC and if we support that, or if maybe if anyone kind of has any trepidations, we're happy to answer any more questions.
Why, can you answer, why is this not a CST, it's not a priority now when they recuse them? Because I know that most of them who were in the beginning was people from Manila, Lower Manila. Now everybody is recusing themselves from this particular this particular subcommittee to another subcommittee. So what is the benefit of them? I'm not questioning on what the motive or whatever, but as far as this is concerned, it's not a priority. It's just like, okay, it doesn't matter. We're not going to deal with this. What is it? But what is not, why it's not less of a priority then? Thank you.
Yeah, this is Stephanie. To clarify, Douglas, I don't think it's any less of a priority to anyone who's no longer attending. Just in terms of anyone, in this subcommittee, we are getting very into detail about what kind of contractor we're looking for, and at this point, if anyone does plan to apply for it, I don't think, just kind of legally, it's very fair for someone who plans to apply for the RFP to then have a say in who's getting picked, right? And so at this point, anyone that's deciding to apply for it has kind of stepped back from that process. So I don't think it's necessarily, prioritizing or not. It's more so if they do plan to apply for it, they just at this point can't have any more say in how we're picking an applicant. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Perfect. And I just want to note, I saw some thumbs up. I saw a thumbs up from Sue and a thumbs up from Margot.
I think we do need to hear from Ned for a final yes from Ned too, if that's okay. And is Mary usually on this subcommittee? This is Margot talking.
I do think I have seen both of them at this subcommittee.
So maybe just, I don't know, can you check in with them and just tell them where we're at, and just make sure because they always had some issues that they wanted to fine tune. So just kind of get a final thumbs up from them.
Yeah, I think that's something we can do. I'm wondering, maybe in the meantime, we can kind of, say this, generally this group was in favor of, had no issues with moving forward with the RFP, but touching base with some of our regular other subcommittee members to see if they have any last thoughts. And if it's the case that smaller group agrees, then we'll go ahead and move forward to the full CSC. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. And I think this has been good work. So thank you, everybody who worked on this.
Thank you all. We appreciate all the feedback. And I think we had some really great questions that I'm glad we had a chance to clarify today. So just in terms of next steps with the district, we'll kind of get together a quick email for some of our regular subcommittee, tree subcommittee members to just kind of let them know about what happened in this meeting and just kind of get any final feedback from those subcommittee members. And if all goes well, then we can look to send out a poll to the entire CSC to potentially look to release this RFP hopefully soon. Yeah, seeing some thumbs up. Awesome. Well, thank you all. And at this point, I just want to see if there's any last questions we have from the group regarding urban greening, vegetative barriers. Otherwise, happy to return kind of these 11 minutes to everyone. And thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your questions. And we're really excited kind of for next steps with this group and potentially to see some trees planted in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Joining.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay cool.